with 208.
Call it for Radio Luxembourg.
Once upon a time, during the decade that finally killed the king, 3 guys crossed the Atlantic Ocean from Great Britain with a hope in their heart that they could meet the legend Elvis Presley in person. They did, more than once. The following program features Todd Slaughter, Ian Bailey, and Tony Prince discussing their exclusive meetings at the court of the King Elvis. This program is being repeated by popular demand. Well, hello everybody. This is Tony Prince here on Radio Luxembourg on the King Size Night, and we're just going to interrupt the music occasionally for the next 60 minutes. I have a couple of guests in the studio. We have the Elvis Presley Fan Club Secretary, long-serving king of the fan club, and that's Todd Slaughter. Good evening, Todd. Welcome.
Good evening, Tony.
And good evening to Ian Bailey, who's... Actually, Ian, what is your position now? What are you doing?
Well, yeah, I think you could more or less say entertainment's officer for the fan club. We also do the merchandising for the fan club.
Right. So we'll talk about the merchandising situation a bit later. What we're going to do in the next hour, Todd, Ian and I, is we're going to try and recount one of the most magic moments in our life when we met Elvis. It was back in 1972, wasn't it, fellas?
Yeah.
And the reason we met Elvis was basically all down to Todd Slaughter's endeavors to get the first fan club convention or holiday trip to America. Did that take some doing, Todd? How many people came with us in 72?
That was the first trip we did, and I think before we tried to do it, we didn't really know what the demand was going to be. It was the first time it was tried. Of course, in those days, it was a tremendous amount of money. I think the first trip set everybody back 180 quid. And that included everything for 2 weeks.
That was before the pound devalued, wasn't it?
Long before the pound and before the Arabs started playing about with the oil.
Yes.
But it was a tremendous thing to put together. We because we hadn't done it before, it became more and more difficult as it went on.
Did you get much help from Colonel Parker in those days, or Tom Diskin, his assistant?
We originally approached Colonel Parker for some help, and he replied to the effect that he wouldn't. But nearer the time to the departure, he did actually arrange some tickets for one of the concerts. In fact, it was quite a splendid concert that night, because if you remember, you were the person that introduced Elvis Presley on stage, and I think that's almost got to be a record for the Hilton, because I don't think anybody else ever went on that stage and introduced the Elvis Presley show. Yeah,
it was one of my great hustles of my life, getting on stage to introduce Elvis and to tell all the people in the audience. In fact, I think we've got a recording of it here.
Radio Lucky Luxembourg.
Tell me who's the greatest singer in the world! Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Sorry to interrupt you. We're a little early. The show doesn't begin yet. I just wanted to say a few words, and I hope you'll let me say them. My name's Tony Prince. I'm a disc jockey in Europe on a radio station called Radio Luxembourg, broadcasting to Great Britain. You know, that's nice. Is there anybody here tonight who has traveled more than 1,000 miles to come to the Elvis show? Put your hands up. Is there anybody here tonight who's traveled more than 2,000 miles to get here tonight? Is there anybody here tonight who's traveled more than 3,000 miles to get here? There are a few hands left. Anybody more than 4,000 miles? Oh, we're losing them up there. We've still got a few here. Is there anybody here tonight who has traveled 5,000 miles to see this show tonight? Ladies and gentlemen, the people with their hands up are from the Elvis Presley Fan Club of Great Britain who made it here tonight. Can we have a round of applause for them? Ladies and gentlemen, being Americans, or wherever you come from, you may not appreciate the fact that Elvis Presley has never appeared in Great Britain. Never, never, never. We've had his movies, his TV shows, but a personal appearance we have never had in Great Britain. So what we say is, if the mountain won't come to Mohammed, 200 Mohammeds come to the mountain, and we're here tonight. Thank you. In a way, for us here from Britain, tonight is the peak of a pilgrimage, and we are here to pay our own little tribute, even though it costs about $600 a head, to pay our own little tribute to our king, to the only pop singer, or rock singer, or singer-swinger who is a legend in his own time. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley Show. Thank you.
Luxembourg, don't it, Prince? Luxembourg, don't it, Prince?
Well, that was a very big moment for your royal ruler, going on stage and then after that announcement walking off and seeing Elvis standing in the wings and winking at me. That was quite a thing. But bigger than that was the actual getting down to see Elvis. I mean, Todd, you've been his fan club secretary for how long now? Quite a long time.
Well, it's coming up for 12 years.
And even then, in 72, you had no idea whether even you would get to meet Elvis.
No, from the experience of everyone else that had previously been to the States, we were always told that the chance to see Elvis Presley was very, very slim. And especially when Presley was appearing in Las Vegas. Obviously, the security was that great that only a very few privileged people could actually get there. And of course, Elvis's suite was on the umpteenth floor, and nobody really had the opportunity to even try to gate crash up there because it was so well securely guarded.
Yeah, and from Radio Luxembourg's point of view, I went along with you, and as honorary president, you'd invited me to join you on this trip, and it was quite a holiday, and you've still got to be congratulated on that first one because it really was an amazing holiday and everyone enjoyed themselves. But I went along wondering, you know, could I actually get a microphone in front of Elvis's lips? Could I get him to say a few words? Could I be the first DJ in Europe to ever get a solo interview with Elvis? So that was my ambition, and I had no idea that it could be achieved. When we went over there, it wasn't until we got to Las Vegas that we even had an idea we would maybe get to see Elvis. I mean, we didn't dare think we would, did we, at that stage?
No, not at all. In fact, we didn't think we would get to see Colonel Parker. And also, from what we gathered, that if we wanted to get to Elvis, the only person that would allow it would be Colonel Parker. And he, of course, was and still is as elusive as Elvis was. Although he was seen possibly walking around the casino at times, he was certainly the most unapproachable person that could ever be.
Ian, what did you think when we were going over to Vegas? Did you think you'd get to see Elvis?
Well, I've been an Elvis fan since the beginning, actually, Tony. I mean, it was beyond my wildest dreams to get on a plane and go to Las Vegas to see Elvis in concert, but let alone meet the guy. You know, I secretly hoped at the back of my mind that we would meet him, but as you've just said, chances are that you get to see him very slight.
That's right. Now, I'd written on Radio Luxembourg-headed paper and said, I'm coming with Todd, and I've been writing to you for years, Colonel, and I've been longing to do an interview with Elvis. What would be the chance now that I'm actually coming over to Elvis? And I received a reply from Tom Diskin, which said, we'll see when you get here. And I thought, oh, yes, I've heard that before. But anyway, we got to Las Vegas, having been to Tupelo and Memphis and Nashville, and we were having a lovely holiday, weren't we? We'd seen the house where Elvis was born. What was your reaction, Ian, when you saw the house, that little two-room shack in Tupelo?
Well, I'd got mixed reactions about the place. I thought it'd be a little bigger than it actually was, and to think that the man, as we know as Elvis Presley, the big superstar, had come so far from his childhood, and to be the big sort of pop giant of all time. That people go back there to look purely at the house where he was born. I was very, very impressed with the place. I mean, obviously they've painted it up now and made it real spick and span to what it was in the early days with the snake pits, etc. You know. But, I was very impressed with it.
I don't think people, Todd, have got any concept how small that house is, have they?
No, I suppose if you had to describe it, it was a mixture between an Anderson air raid shelter and a wooden garden shed.
Yeah.
And it was about the same size as two put together.
Actually, you've got a book coming out. It came out last week, Elvis, the official fan club memorial issue, which sells at 75p, and there is a photo of the house in there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a little white wooden shed with a very small sloping roof, obviously built off the ground so that rats and snakes and goodness knows what else couldn't get in. And I suppose if you had to describe the environment as it was at the time, if you can imagine a small hillside with half a dozen wooden sheds on, that's really all it would have been.
Yeah.
And built there purely to feed the agricultural needs of a growing Mississippi.
That's right, but the one thing that people, even if they see the photo of the house, you've got to stand there in that heat and realise what Elvis and his family must have lived through. No air conditioning. And that heat, I remember getting off the air-conditioned coach and thinking, my God, I'm in an oven. Didn't you think that?
I thought so.
I've never been anywhere as hot in my life. And humid as well. It must have been terrible living there.
Colourful Radio Luxembourg.
Anyway, we saw the house and everyone was very nice, and the mayor met us, and the police gave us an escort in and out of town, and we really felt important, didn't we?
I'm sure at the time we really were important, because although most Elvis Presley fans knew that Elvis was born in Tupelo, hardly any people actually visited the town. In fact, the town's become more of a tourist thing since Elvis died than he ever did when he was alive.
That's right. The Elvis Presley Recreation Centre now, isn't it? That's what it's called, the park, Elvis Park. And, of course, we went to the house and we saw Uncle Vester, who looks after the grounds of Gracelands, and we all stood for photos outside the front door, and that was a nice thing to do as well, wasn't it? Vester was great, wasn't he? Elvis's uncle.
Yeah, Vester's always been a bit of a personality, and I suppose really he must be one of the world's most well-known uncles.
That's right.
I mean, he's been photographed in many books and been interviewed on television many times. I always think it's a shame that he never was probably brought more into the family life of things.
Right. Maybe he was. Maybe we just didn't see it, you know.
Well, probably so, but from what I can gather, he was the gate man, and that was it. But he was a very likeable personality, and everybody's got a lovely thing to say about him.
That's right. Now, I wonder what Vester's doing now. Are you still in contact with him?
Well, he's still looking after the Graceland gates. Since Vernon Presley died a few weeks ago, I don't know whether his position has changed, because the only Presley living in the property now is the Minnie Presley, the aged grandmother.
Yeah.
And I don't know how old she is, Ian.
I wonder how she feels to have outlived this great grandson of hers, and I don't mean great grandson, I mean a fantastic grandson, and her son, and she's still living there. She must have had a very, very weird life, one way or another, Minnie. Oh, did you ever meet her, Ian?
No.
No, you didn't, Todd, either, did you?
No, I think I would gather now she's probably bedridden. I know she's not really been out of the house for years, I wouldn't think.
Right.
And it must be quite tragic to have that sort of life and have all your family disappear from you.
Yeah. I mean, although Elvis had a great, great love for his mum, you never heard him talking about Gran, did you, a lot? He never used to mention
hardly
her.
ever.
No.
I think she was probably more known to the fans, actually, than to anyone else. And hardly any photographs were ever taken of her.
The last picture I can remember of Elvis's grandma was about 1957. I haven't seen one since.
Right. The Gracelands, we didn't get inside, neither in 72 or 73. Did you ever get inside, Todd, or do you know anyone who went inside?
I only ever went in once, and that was at the back entrance, after Elvis died.
Yeah.
I went over to the States for something to do with Colonel Parker, and happened to go to Memphis, and I went to see Vernon. I think it was about 3 months before our memorial tour last year. And he seemed in good spirits.
The Colonel seemed in good spirits.
No, Vernon.
Vernon did.
In good spirits.
Yeah.
Although he lived in a house adjacent to Graceland, a few months ago he actually sold that property and moved into Graceland itself.
I see. Yeah.
But I've never been in the major rooms of it. I only went in the tradesman's entrance.
Right. But you always got on well with Vernon, didn't you? I remember even back in 73, he was actually saying to you, look, write to me or contact me and I'll help you to get to Elvis and do things and whatever.
I think one of the problems, of course, with contacting any of the Presley family was that they got, over the years, such a deluge of mail. Mailbags delivered every day, that it was a task and a half just to employ people to actually sort through the lot.
Right.
And of course, they had to open every letter just in case there were parking tickets and bills and everything else stuck in there. So, so they had to cope with the mail.
Must have been an amazing task. Anyway, there we were in 1972 with 200 fans with us, and we were on this fantastic air-conditioned coach. In fact, we were on 3 coaches, weren't we? Was it 2 or 3?
More than that, I think.
Was it?
6, right?
Was it? Yeah, my memory's a bit jaded over the last 7 years. And we headed out to down towards Las Vegas. We got off the plane, and there was nobody to meet us that particular year. And we got in the coach, and we all went down to outside. We had a hotel problem, didn't we?
Circus.
We were booked in the Circus.
But overbooked.
They'd overbooked, and we'd nowhere to go. They were trying to fob us off in a place down the road, which we didn't fancy. And our travel agent, God bless him, David Wade, he did an incredible job. I went in the Circus, and I thought, my goodness, he's talking to the manager of the Circus. He might have those Italian contacts we've all heard of. And there was David, a very staid English young man, giving him some stick in the office, saying, what do you mean we can't come in this office? We demand I'll report you to the Hotel Board of America. And I was shivering in the corner, oh, any minute now there's going to be a gangster come out here and pump some lead into us, you know. But anyway, we got into a nice hotel. And then we went down to see the Colonel, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
And this is the amazing bit to me. This is where it all really began.
Well, we didn't know how to get to Colonel Parker, and the odd thing was that early the following morning, when we all woke up, I had a telephone call from the Colonel that said, "Come on, get down here quickly." And of course, the strange thing was that the Colonel was phoning at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning when we were completely exhausted.
Yeah.
Having done thousands and thousands of miles, and the last thing we wanted to do was to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, but that's what he wanted, so we all did, and we all stormed over to the Hilton, where he was keeping court in a tremendous suite. He must have had probably half a floor just to himself.
I thought it was the whole floor, actually. It was so big. And the guys with the guns looking after the corridor, make sure, nobody went in who wasn't allowed in.
It was a real security thing. If I remember rightly, the Colonel had lined all the corridors with hound dogs.
That's
all
right.
the way to his office, and round every conceivable corner there were these 3-foot hound dogs staring at everybody. And I'm sure there were probably 2 or 3 golden retrievers around some doorway to have a go at anybody that tried to get him.
Ian, I can't remember, were you with us on that first meeting with Parker?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. I mean, I was so overwhelmed with Parker, I can't remember anybody else being around. I mean, people say, what was Parker like? And I can only give the comparison to somebody like Jimmy Savile, an American Jimmy Savile. He's very shrewd, very clever. He's always got a quick word, and he's always got an answer. One hell of a businessman. But there we were in the office. We met Tom Diskin, the legendary assistant we've only ever seen on letters before. And everyone was so pleasant to us, weren't they?
Yeah, we didn't expect such pleasantries, especially from the Colonel. And I thought any meeting with the Colonel would last for about 3 minutes, and we'd be in and out.
How long were we there, in fact?
I reckon we were with Parker the first time for a good couple of hours, because he relayed so many stories. The odd thing was that we were all there, we were all Elvis Presley fans, none of us dare talk about Elvis Presley, and because Parker was such a character anyway, we wanted to listen to his stories.
That's right. As I said, he always had a quick answer. I thought, right, I was looking out of his office window to these mountains in the background, just past Las Vegas. The horizon's got these huge mountains, hasn't it? And I said to Colonel Parker, listen, you spend a lot of money advertising Elvis in lights and on forms around town. Everywhere you go, it says Elvis is at the Hilton. Why don't you save money? Just send some guys with hammers and chisels up to those mountains and carve Elvis's face out of a mountain like they do in the national park with the presidents. And he came back without a moment's hesitation, looked up at the mountains. He said, well, I can tell, Mr. Prince, that you're new to Las Vegas, because if you lived here all the time, you'd realize that 60% of the day that mountain is shrouded in a mist. It wouldn't be financially worthwhile. People wouldn't see it. This is Radio Luxembourg on a king-size night. And my guests, I'm Tony Prince, my guests, Todd Slaughter and Ian Bailey. Todd and Ian have been together a long time. Todd is the president, main man in the Elvis Presley Fan Club of Great Britain, and Ian, he does all the merchandising around Britain and Europe for Elvis things. And we're talking about our memories of '72 when the 3 of us went to meet Elvis Presley and how we finally got down to meet the King in his dressing room. So back to Tom Parker now. Ian, you can recount this story. He was a great Shylock. He'd come up with some incredible publicity stunts, and he was actually bragging to us, wasn't he, telling us about some of the great things he'd done to get publicity. Do you remember the story about the RSPCA with the puppy that fell down the manhole?
And yeah. He at the particular time he was telling us about, he was working for the Humane Society down in Florida, and they'd rigged up this little stunt whereby they'd got a puppy dog down this manhole to try and raise money for this Humane Society, and they'd got a little guy down this manhole about 3 or 4 feet down. It was a midget. The guy was a midget. And they got this little puppy, and they said the puppy had fell down about 50 feet. Now they got a big crowd of people all around this manhole, but nobody could see down it.
And the fact was, the puppy wasn't really stuck down there, was it? He said, we could have gone down, and we could have got it up in a minute. So to get the publicity, they played, he said, what did they do? They pinched its tail to make it yelp a little bit.
Yeah.
And they put dirt all over it so that it looked like it had been stuck.
The press and the radio and God knows what. And they made a lot of money out of that particular stunt.
That's right. Got a TV and everything.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, my ambition as Tony Prince representing Radio Luxembourg was to try to meet Elvis and get an interview with him. And I just didn't think I had an earthly chance. And out of the blue, I said, well, Mr. Parker, well, what about it? What about the interview with Elvis? Interview, he bellowed.
He did as well, and it was a bellow like you've never heard before. In fact, we didn't know after that moment whether we'd all be turfed out immediately. But all of a sudden, he settled back in his chair, and he didn't give a yes and he didn't give a no. But he said that he would think about it. And then you pursued the matter even more and said, well, look, I'll take a tape recorder and a microphone in with me. And then he turned round to Tom Diskin. And he said, remind me, Tom, to take these glasses, will you? And he took off his spectacles and pushed both lenses out.
Yeah, and at that particular time, Tony, if you remember, you asked him also if you could introduce Elvis from the stage.
That's right. I mean, I thought, well, I might just get one or the other. I was pumping for an interview, and I said, look, it's also been my ambition to introduce Elvis on stage as a DJ compere. What's the chance? He said, no chance whatsoever. No. He said, I'll see you tonight at dinner. And now, he'd said to us, hadn't he, just before we were going, he said, I'll see you tonight at dinner, and then I'll take you down to see Elvis. At which stage we knew we were going to meet Elvis, didn't we? It was at that point. He said he was going to collect us just before the show, in the showroom, and then he would come for us and take us down. So that was fantastic. And the next thing he said, Todd, with regard to the fans, you can't bring them all to meet Elvis. There's just too many of them. But what did he offer?
Well, I think in the end we were able to take about 15 people with us. What I had to do was to select some of the people that the Colonel had already seen a few days beforehand on the trip. And it wasn't so much a Dutch auction, more of a you and you exercise, which wasn't a very nice thing to do, but of course other fans also, during the time we were in Las Vegas, had the chance to meet Elvis. I think on that trip probably 30 or 40 fans did, which was quite a high percentage.
During the 4 or 5 days we were there, yeah. But the Parker did something very, very human, and it showed him up as a real person, and it totally destroyed any image I ever had of him. He said, although everybody can't meet Elvis, he'd certainly like to meet every one of them himself. And do you remember he got Diskin, he said, Tom, how much is a hound dog worth? How much is that poster worth? And he got all these souvenirs of Elvis, which they sell down in the foyer in the Hilton Hotel. And he worked it out, that a package, and he got a package of these things together, Elvis souvenirs, and it came to about $60, didn't it? He said, I'll tell you what, I want you to bring them up at about 20 at a time, and Tony Prince, you can take the money off them. We're going to charge them $30 each, not 60 like they'd have to pay downstairs. They can have a package of these goodies, the hound dog, the photograph, the poster, $30. What we did, I mean, we spent a whole afternoon bringing these tribes of fans up, didn't we? 10 lots of 20 kids to meet Colonel in this incredible suite. He showed them around, shook hands with every one of them.
Yeah, he was very nice to all of them. In fact, some of them were quite frightened to meet Colonel Parker because they didn't know what he would do. But he was very hospitable. I think everybody had a Coke and they all had
Dr. Pepper and
all peculiar things to eat. It was very, very nice. And then as they went up in groups, they were able to see his suite, talk to him, buy the lucky bag of gifts, and off they trotted. And
they'd all paid the $30. And the incredible thing was, they all went back down to the coach, waiting for Todd, Ian, and I. And Parker's counting the money, or one of his secretaries is doing the showbiz bit again, counting out the money, and he counts it up, and it came to something like
$980.
$980, and he said, Slaughter, come here. And he put it in his hand, didn't he? And what did he tell you to do with it?
He said, don't spend it on yourself, don't spend it on the gambling tables. In fact, I think he told you not to spend it on the gambling tables.
Yes.
Gave you an extra 20 and said, there's 1,000.
He put $20 out of his own pocket, made it 1,000.
And he said, have a party on the Colonel before you leave.
That's right.
Which was a terrific thing to do.
And we did.
And we did. We really did have a great party.
We went to Las
that
Vegas
night.
and we had a party on the Colonel and Elvis.
For all that's worthwhile, your radio dial is on Radio Luxembourg.
Right, Ian, we were sitting in the showroom, ready to see Elvis for the first time. Or was it the second time? Had we seen him the night
I remember
before?
the first time, there was yourself, myself and my wife went to see Elvis on the Saturday night.
That's right.
And the thing what always sticks out most in my memory, I mean, I was obviously excited about the prospect of seeing Elvis live after waiting all these years. And the thing what sticks out more than anything in my memory is you, funny enough, Tony, in front of me. You sat in front of me.
Well, that would stick out in your memory of us blocking your view.
Yeah, but the way you was excited, jumping about in your seat,
Yeah.
you were there, literally shouting, "Come on, Elvis! Come on, Elvis!"
Yeah.
And I'd never seen anybody so excited in my life.
Well, it was an ambition. It was an ambition. I remember tearing up, when he came on stage with the Alzo Zarathustra theme tune. And I was just overwhelmed. I just had to sit back in my chair once he'd got on stage and allow the tears to come down, because he was a bit of me, He was me going back to that dressing room mirror with a cricket bat, pretending to be him. He was a part of a lot of people's youth, and me very much so. And I'm not ashamed to say that when I saw him on stage for the first time, I had a good weep. I was so absolutely overwhelmed with emotion. It was fantastic. Well, that was the first night. We all saw the show. We were all knocked out and we all rebooked. But then Colonel Parker made us his guests for this after we'd seen the Colonel, Todd, and we were sitting there.
Well, we all sat in the Colonel's booth, and then, of course, it was time to collect people together to go and see Elvis Presley. And I don't think really any of us we knew what was going to happen, because most of us have met other personalities, other stars, and they all behave differently, but Elvis was really the untouchable, the unapproachable. And we gathered our little clan together and followed the Colonel along some corridors and through doors, downstairs, in and out of lifts, and eventually we got to this rather nice suite, and we all filed in there and made a sort of a line. And almost, certainly without mention, and not at the time that we were expecting it, Elvis Presley pulled in.
He was just standing there.
And he was appeared, didn't it?
I'd been like talking to the Colonel and talking to one of his henchmen, and there's all these guys with guns around, weren't there? The guards taking us down there. And I was just standing there wondering whether my tape recorder battery was going to fail on me or anything like that. I've got a handbag over my shoulder, because I didn't want to be too conspicuous with it, because the Colonel had said, I'm not going to wear my glasses, it's not allowed. So I thought I won't totally prostitute the situation, and I had the microphone hanging out of my bag so that I could capture everything. And I was most concerned about, suddenly I looked up and there's the man, standing at the door chatting to one of his friends, and I hadn't even seen it, he hadn't been announced. And he just came in.
He came in as if it was a private cocktail
He had the black
party.
suit on, didn't he? He hadn't got his stage gear on at that stage.
No, he got his black suit on with an ordinary shirt and this
White
amazing
shirt, turquoise
Indian
and coral Indian necklace.
That's right. What was your immediate impression, Ian?
Oh, stunned by the guy's how good looking he was. I mean, I never thought, after seeing the guy in the flesh, Elvis was never photogenic.
There's something else that hit me. I'd expected to be straining my neck looking up at him. He wasn't as tall as I'd always envisaged.
No, I think we all had thought that Elvis Presley would be 8 foot tall, and when he'd enter the room there'd be a great aurora around his head and a fanfare, and of course that didn't happen. And markedly, Elvis was very, very quiet, and he appeared very shy. And I suppose one of the reasons for this was that in Las Vegas, if you're a high roller, a big spender, and you spent a lot of money in the casinos, and we're talking of probably millions of dollars over a period of a couple of weeks, I think it was the accepted thing in all casinos that if you did spend a lot of money, you and your daughter or whatever got to meet the star. And of course Elvis must have been wheeled many times in to meet these high gamblers that he obviously wasn't interested in. He was far more interested in meeting the fans, and he probably was almost unaware of who he was actually meeting. And I was given the task, along with you, to introduce all the fans that were in the room
That's right.
to Elvis.
Yeah.
And all the guys shook his hands and all the girls kissed him, and he gave all the girls a scarf. And then it was up to you to interview or get something on tape.
That's right.
For Radio Luxembourg.
Yeah.
And of course it was that moment that you'd had lots and lots of questions given to you, but you didn't really know which one to ask first, and it was very difficult, wasn't it?
I totally blew it. I mean, you know, everybody gets a bit uptight when you're meeting a star to interview. You think, I don't want to make myself look foolish by asking the wrong questions. And the ideal interview is to listen to your interviewee and to let the questions flow from their answers instead of regarding a script of questions and answers, because then you don't get a real interview. And I thought, oh, God, I'm going to blow it. And I guess I was as nervous as I've ever been in my life in terms of getting an interview right. I was worried about the tape recorder. I couldn't be too blatant with the microphone, and the recording quality wasn't that fantastic at the end of the day. But I did ask certain questions. I think we've got one or two of them here. Elvis, we've got a few questions of fans on the trip have asked me to ask you. Who designs your clothes these days?
A guy with the name of Bill Belew.
Bill Belew.
B-E-L-E-W.
Do you not do any designing yourself?
Yeah. I dream them up, and he writes them up.
He gets them together for you?
Work them together.
Yeah. A lot of people want to know whether we'll ever get a full album of Elvis blues or go back to rock and roll. Are you going to get back into the blues at all?
Working on it.
Get it together? Merry Christmas, baby.
Just so happen to be working on a rock and roll and a blues album in Memphis.
Really? You're working on it right now?
We're getting the songs together.
Great. We'll look forward to that.
Coincidence that you asked me that, but it's true.
You only ever recorded one country and western album. Did you ever think of recording any more?
Oh, sure.
Do you dig country music?
It's according to the song.
I guess the questions weren't... It wasn't the event. It didn't really matter. The fact that Elvis was actually talking into the mic, I just couldn't believe. And we all had our photo taken with him, didn't we? And he put his arm around us. And you gave him a presentation, didn't you?
Yeah, I'd got an award from, I think it was the New Musical Express, for being voted, as he had been for years, the #1 male singer for the world.
Was that the cup we had the ice in that?
No, that was the following year. Now, this was a Rose Bowl, I think, of some description. It was very nice, and he received it, and I suppose he put it with all the rest in his trophy room in Memphis. But he was very nice, and he was very, very polite, but he was exceptionally shy.
He was very shy about the fact that he'd never been to England, if you remember it.
That's right, he was very concerned. I don't know if it was the second year when I saw him. No, it was the first year. And he actually said something to the effect of, tell them I love them for the devotion, and I really will get over there. I know I keep saying this, but I really will get over there one day. And I really think at that stage he had every intention of embarking on a world tour. Todd, you've got a theory that he could never have just done Britain. He would have had to have gone elsewhere.
I think he would have had to have done the world. From what the Colonel told me in later years, that he really had outstanding commitments in the States. And when they were completed, then he would go to Canada, where he'd been contracted to appear for 2 or 3 years. And after that, then he would embark on a world tour, and all that really took place around Christmas of 1976. But of course, by the time 77 came, his health had deteriorated so bad that he completed the 6 concerts that he did, concert seasons that he had to do, and of course he died. But I think then we were more near to getting Elvis Presley to Britain than we'd ever be, but of course it never happened. Last year we did our first memorial tour to the States, and it was very, very successful. Obviously, when Elvis died, we realised we couldn't take fans to see him in concert, but we didn't really know what the success of a memorial tour would be. And we put one together last year, and it was very successful. This year we're taking almost 400 people.
That's amazing.
And the odd thing is we're taking more people, sadly, I think, now that Elvis has died, than when he was alive. And I think a lot of fans were saving for years and years, but not seriously saving, but still with the intent to go, and of course they left it too late.
That's right.
But over the years, I think we took almost 2,000 people to see Elvis in concert.
What about the time when you got there? I think it was the third year, and Elvis was taken sick, and it wasn't in Cabaret in Vegas. That was soul-destroying for a lot of the fans, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was awful. I mean, he was booked to appear, and by the time we got to Las Vegas, he was... In fact, I think at the time our plane landed, he was on stage performing. And then he did a second show, which some of the fans managed to get in to see. But the bulk of the fans were waiting till the following day to recuperate from the travel. And of course, I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning, switched on the radio to hear the news that Elvis had left town. And as the day wound on, we found out that he'd been taken ill and was rushed back to Memphis.
Yeah.
And that was a tragic year for all Elvis Presley fans. Because when you think of it, although in comparison the trip was cheap in those days, it still meant an awful lot of money to people. And so obviously lots of them were unable to ever make the pilgrimage again.
Yeah. You've seen the Colonel recently, as you just said, a while back. What's he like these days? I mean, how does he feel about El dying? Has he discussed it with you?
Not really, no. In fact, he's almost totally avoided talking about that. I think, although the Colonel is a shrewd old boy and you think he'd be untouched by most things, I think when he lost Elvis Presley, it set him back a tremendous amount. He really felt it.
Was it unexpected to the Colonel?
Nobody seems to talk about it. From what we can gather, I mean, it was very unexpected for Elvis. I don't think he expected to die as quick as he did.
So you don't think there's any element of suicide?
No, not at all. Right. Although, what I'm surprised by are all the people that lived with Elvis and all the people that were very close to him. They couldn't see that his condition was deteriorating.
Were they not afraid of Elvis? They were afraid to kind of, say, boss him around or anything like that, but were there not a lot of yes men around him?
Oh, I think they all were. I think that was the problem.
He really needed one person there who was, like, unafraid of him, who he respected and loved. If he'd have had that person in his life who could have said, now look, you, cool it and calm down, you know, somebody who could have talked common sense to him rather than a bunch of yes people who were just interested in parties and good times and Cadillacs. Is that a fair comment?
I'm sure it's a fair comment. All those guys that were around him were obviously not told to speak at the right time, but I think they guarded themselves because, let's face it, they had their own jobs to maintain. But I think it's still very sad that someone couldn't have got through to Elvis. Obviously, he really was almost without a friend.
Yeah. Back to Ian Bailey, Elvis's merchandising man. Are you doing much more merchandising of Elvis products in Britain these days than you were before he died?
Oh, yes. I would think our sales have gone up probably 100% since Elvis's death.
It's a full-time job for you, Ian?
Yeah, it's a full-time job. It keeps us on the go all the while. We mail out stuff, Elvis items rather, all over the world. It's big business. But of course, we've not just jumped on the bandwagon. We've been into this side of with the club for many years. And of course, it just got out of hand, so I had to pack the job up and do it full time.
You enjoying it?
Oh yeah, I love it. I mean, it's a small thing. I've always been into Elvis.
Right. And the Elvis fans, of course, who are a great troop of people, you know.
Oh, the best.
They really are. Gentle people, really lovely people.
I suppose that's really a strange thing about all followers of stars. I mean, most of the real fans of real stars are very, very nice people. It's the fringe fans and the people that, you know, get in at the last minute that do tend to spoil it on occasion.
Yeah.
Radio Luxembourg!
Ian, as a merchandising person, the person who, like, does the hound dogs and the posters and everything else, and your life being more closely connected with Elvis, as is Todd's, than, let's say, the ordinary fan in the street, how did you react the night you heard Elvis died, and how did you hear the news?
Well, to some extent, Tony, I was more or less expecting it, to be quite honest with you. We'd seen Elvis in concert about 6 weeks previous, on his last two concerts, and I sat with Todd in the audience. We wasn't too far away from Elvis, and we'd both remarked how ill he did look.
He did look ill, did he?
Yeah. And it was just some sort of feedback we had of him, and as a matter of fact, I heard it first on on the TV, and then I immediately switched on to Radio Luxembourg, funny enough, and you was on doing a show.
That's right.
You went on all night, but I was, literally stunned by it, even though to some extent I did expect it.
Yeah.
Your
wife's a big Elvis fan as well, isn't she?
Correct, yeah.
How did she take it?
Stunned. Really stunned. We followed Elvis's career since 1956. It was just as if the bottom had dropped out of everything.
Yeah.
No more. Immediately you think no more records, no more films, no more live appearances, no more new photographs. But of course, it's just snowballed from that particular time, and I think it's something which will never ever die. We expect that we get new fans, obviously, younger fans, which you lose. But Elvis will always have a loyal band of followers who will never desert him.
Yeah.
He'll always go to the film shows and the discos.
Do you think he'll have the next generation as his fans?
Yeah, well, I tend to think music revolves in a circle.
Once our generation's dead, you know, I'm talking about the people who are born with Elvis coming into their ears. Do you think our kids and their kids will always... What about you, Todd? You're a fan club secretary. What do you think he'll carry on forever?
I think, well, not to eternity, I don't suppose, but I will think in 100 years' time the Tony Princes of this world will still be playing the Golden Oldies by Elvis Presley.
I certainly will.
I don't think that music's going to change that much anyway, simply because every facet of it now has been experienced, and there's not a lot of creativity left in the business.
Yeah. His early recordings, though, still stand up, you know. They're still very exciting. Johnny Rotten and all these people could never come anywhere near to just raw excitement with one man and about 4 instruments and the Jordanaires.
Yeah, and about 50 bobs worth of equipment to record it on. That was the big thing. All these major hits by Elvis, right up until probably 1964, were all recorded on 2-track tape recorders. There was none of this 32 tracks and overdubs and extra musicians and goodness knows what else put on years after the things had been recorded.
Yeah.
And those early soundtracks were recorded in equipment that you would throw away these days.
208.
Did you ever meet Elvis again after 72 and 73?
Yes, just 6 weeks before he died.
You did you?
Yeah.
And that's when you both thought that he was quite ill?
Well, it was a very, very strange thing. To launch his world tour, Elvis, or the Colonel, had decided that Elvis should do another TV special.
He was going to do a world tour?
Yes, he was. He was going to do this TV special, and it was going to be the launch pad for it. Right. And he filmed it for CBS television in the States. And all the Colonel wanted from us was to get the fans over to see Elvis in concert instead of in cabaret.
Yeah.
And he said, once this takes place, the publicity is going to be great, and then we're going to tour Elvis. And of course, I was gotten out of bed about 6 o'clock one morning and bundled into a car and driven from Cincinnati to Indianapolis and locked into a hotel. I was told initially it was Colonel Parker's 68th birthday and there was going to be a party. And we were there at midday, and I think we were locked in the hotel till about 8 o'clock at night, and then we were taken out.
You couldn't get out of the hotel?
Couldn't get out of the hotel.
Why not? Was Elvis there?
Elvis wasn't there at all, no. As soon as I arrived, we went into a dining room with the CBS people, and we all sat down. We had a meal on the Colonel, which was unusual. And we all wined and dined and sang happy birthday to him. And then I was escorted back to the room and imprisoned again. And it was very, very strange. And then it's about 8 o'clock. It seemed as if everybody and his auntie was outside the hotel in Land Rovers and Jeeps and goodness knows what else. And a whole cavalcade of cars. And I went in, I think it was an old Hilton van with the Colonel in the middle of this, what he termed as the Colonel's private army. And we drove through the gates of the airport onto the actual airport itself and waited the arrival of Elvis's plane. Elvis was due on stage at 10 o'clock.
Who was with you there? Was he in there?
No, it was only me.
Just yourself?
If I'd have known what was happening at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd got him out of bed. And the sad thing was, we'd taken a couple of gold records with us, hadn't we? Yeah. Which were to be presented to Elvis, and not knowing that was going to happen. Ian had got those. Anyway, we got onto the airport, and then Elvis's plane, the Lisa Marie, landed very spectacularly. And everybody was waiting. The camera crew were all set up for Elvis to come out of the plane, and he didn't.
In case people miss that, Lisa Marie is the name of the plane. It's named after his daughter.
And they didn't get out of the plane. And of course, it was getting dark, and the camera crew then had to start getting in lights, and I hadn't got any lights, so they had to rush to the local TV station to borrow some.
You were all standing there on the forecourt waiting for Elvis to descend out of this plane. Was Colonel Parker with you waiting?
Colonel Parker was with me, and he really never left my side.
Didn't he
but
go
he
up in the
sent
plane
several
himself?
aides into the plane to see if Elvis was coming out.
What does that say about the relationship if he wouldn't go up himself?
I don't think the Colonel was that well. I don't think he could have climbed up, actually.
Really?
I mean, it wasn't your normal international concourse or anything like that. It was almost just an ordinary tin ladder at the side of this enormous plane.
Oh, really?
And I suppose the Colonel wanted to show that he didn't have to go to fetch his boy. But there was a lot of people running around, and of course Elvis was due on stage about half an hour from this time. And eventually...
Could you see him through the window?
No, you couldn't see anything. Couldn't see anything at all. And then eventually Joe Esposito, one of Elvis's aides, came down. And then Elvis's father came down, Vernon Presley, and it took him about 10 minutes to get down because he obviously wasn't well. And he stood at the bottom of the steps, and he looked particularly grey. And I was then permitted to move away from Colonel Parker and go and have a few words with Vernon. And immediately I was hustled back to the safety limit.
What do you have to say to Vernon?
Well, all our exchange was pleasantries. Nice to see you. I hope things are going well. That sort of conversation. Because you couldn't really enter into any great dialogue. And then Elvis appeared dressed in a black tracksuit. And he looked really sick. I was very surprised because we'd seen all these pictures in the papers. And as you know, newspapers do pick the most dramatic picture of an artist to put in, especially if they're trying to tell a story.
Right. And you were in a good position to say that he looked sick because you'd met him twice before and he looked pretty good. Although 72 he looked fantastic. 73 he'd put on the weight, hadn't he?
Yeah, he started to put on the weight at about that time.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was, the film crew that had been filming Elvis out on this concert tour hadn't been allowed to get anywhere near him, and they said, look, we've been following him for a week now. If you get close to Elvis, have a good look at him, because, you know, we think he's going to die. We think he's got about 6 months to live, and that was the producer of the film for CBS television.
Really?
But they were not even allowed to get anywhere near Elvis. And they tell a wonderful story.
Is this the film Elvis the Movie that's coming out?
No, it's the film, what was it called?
CBS
CBS
Elvis
Special.
on Tour.
Oh, the Elvis,
Elvis in Concert.
Sorry.
Elvis in Concert. Right, go on. So they said to you that they felt he was going to die, the crew, the producer.
So they said, you're going to get closer than we've been able to. Have a look at him and see if you can confirm what we say. And of course, when he eventually got down the stairs, I mean, he stood and he hung on to the rails. He looked terrible. Right. And then Colonel Parker got hold of my rear end and threw me into a position. He gave Elvis an award to give to me to commemorate me being secretary of the fan club for 10 years. And
that was nice.
It was very nice. And he said to Elvis, you give that to him. And then Vernon Presley came over and said, Elvis, it's Todd Slaughter.
How did Colonel sound when he was talking to Elvis? Was he a bit short?
Very
short.
Bitter. Yeah. Very, very bombastic.
Oh.
Yeah, the Colonel was the boss on this day anyway. And Elvis looked a bit surprised. Vernon said, it's your fan club secretary. And he turned around and he said, well, look, you know, I'd like to do more, but they won't let me. And then he reached out because he obviously couldn't see very well. And yeah, it was quite a frightening experience.
That was quite a comment. That was quite a comment. Have you ever thought about that statement?
I've thought about it a lot.
I'd like to do more, but they won't let me.
He said, but I'm glad you've brought all the fans over. I was told last night that you brought the fans over, and I'm very pleased. And I said, how are you feeling? And he said, oh, all right. He said, don't look so nervous. And I was absolutely terrified.
Really? Was he very subdued, was he?
He said, don't look so nervous. He said, you know, 60 million people are watching this TV show, but don't look so nervous.
Was that going out on TV?
Well, it was supposed to. But
it was filmed?
But it was cut from the TV show. In fact, I've been trying to get that bit of film for a long time, but I would think that because Elvis looked so bad on it, they probably cut it out.
Right.
And of course, the next thing anybody saw of Elvis was on that stage, and that was the last concert that he did. The Colonel did say something, but I was quite disappointed by this. He said to Elvis, now, Todd's going to come with you in your car to the venue. I thought, that's good. Oh, yes, and have $5 worth of that. But it never happened, because Elvis went very pale, and he was taken back into the aeroplane. And then we all went back into the airport lounge, had a coffee, and then piled into the cars, and went straight to the stadium where Elvis was appearing. By which time, of course, Elvis was a good hour late, and the standard comment was being passed over the public address system. Still, when I got there, still buy your Elvis souvenirs and your Elvis posters for your brochures. Elvis is coming soon. I think he must have been almost 2 hours late that night.
Do you think that Colonel intended to tour him around the world and then perhaps he would have retired?
I don't know.
Would have seemed a logical way to end an incredible career.
Mm.
I mean, how long could he have carried on being Elvis in Vegas? He's getting older.
Mm. I think one of the sad things is that, although we can't put any blame on anybody, but had someone been with Elvis Presley when he had his heart attack before he died, and got into hospital quickly, then he could well have lived, and it could have been that heart attack that would have frightened Elvis enough to take things easy. There were all sorts of stories about the fact that he was on a tremendous amount of dope and pills, and he was being kept alive by uppers and downers and sidewards, but whether that was true or not...
We'll never know that. I guess certain people will know that. What did you think of all these books and Sunday paper stories that came out, and still come out, and people who had very, very little to do with Elvis, basically, are coming out with all these outrageous comments? I find them repulsive, personally.
I'm sure they are, but it's the old newspaper idiom of wanting to sell the papers.
And they can only sell it on scandal.
And of course they can.
Yeah.
I think with 90% of what is ever written about Elvis Presley can be discarded, because he never made himself available to the press.
208.
Todd, you told me a story once. Do you want to relate it on air about the time Colonel told you about, or somebody told you, that Colonel's wife didn't know Elvis had died, and they didn't want to let her know?
Yeah, that was very strange. When Elvis died, it was only a matter of a week before I'd heard from the States that to protect the name, image and likeness of Elvis Presley, that obviously they had to assert some rights to that. In fact, in Japan, I'm told, that within 24 hours of Elvis Presley's death, top executives from RCA went to Japan to reassert their rights, because if anybody dies, their property becomes public domain, and it would have meant that anybody could have issued Elvis Presley material.
Even records?
Even records.
Really?
So the merchandising rights, which obviously were more well protected elsewhere in the world, were asserted to a company in Delaware called Factors Etc. Incorporated, who look after memorabilia for all the artists, or most of the major ones, and all the films and so on. And I was invited to go to Los Angeles to meet them. And whilst I was talking to them about the merchandise which was illegally coming onto the market over here, I was being introduced to the products that we could later on make available to the fans through Ian. And there was a lull in the proceedings, and I got a call to go and see Colonel Parker. And while I was there, Freddie Beanstalk came in. Freddie Beanstalk controls Carlin Music.
Where did you meet him?
At his new office at RCA's building in Sunset Boulevard.
Right.
And we all sat round and had quite a nice chat. The Colonel said, "Look, I want you to see the TV special." That was the one they were filming just before he died, Before You Leave Town. And I gave the Colonel a gift to give to his wife, and he started talking about the fact that his wife had not been very well, that she didn't want, that he thought that she couldn't know at that time that Elvis had died. And what he did, he arranged to have her nurse 24 hours a day. No papers or newspapers could be delivered to the house. She couldn't use the radio, and the television was taken away, because he thought the shock would kill her anyway.
Because she was a great friend of his, wasn't she?
Yeah, very much so. And I think about 2 months before Elvis died, Elvis always had a soft spot for Marie Parker.
Maybe a bit of his mum he saw in her.
I think probably so. And apparently 2 months before he died, he went round to her house. And the Colonel wasn't there. The Colonel was in another part of the country. And he didn't know about it until after Elvis died. And that Elvis had been playing the piano and singing with Mrs. Parker. Apparently she played as well. And they'd been there having a rare old time.
Having a little jam together. And so the Colonel kept it, and probably still does keep it a secret.
Still does,
because she is housebound, isn't she?
She's very housebound, I think she's...
And she's one person on planet Earth who maybe still doesn't know that Elvis is dead.
Probably so, yeah.
Todd Slaughter, Elvis Presley Fan Club Secretary for Great Britain, and Ian Bailey, the main man in Elvis's merchandising, legitimately. I want to thank you both very much indeed for coming down. Have a nice time in America. You'll be there tonight, and we'll all be thinking of you. Long live the King.
Thank you very much,
Big L 208. right.
And so we come to the end of Volume 1 of my Elvis program trilogy. Thanks to Todd and Ian for sharing these very special experiences with me, and thanks also to the late Colonel Parker and Elvis for making magic happen in 1972. In Volume 2, we retrace my 1973 experiences with some quite amazing interviews. This is Tony Prince, your Royal Regal Ruler, Honorary President of the Elvis Presley Fan Club of Great Britain since 1967, wishing you well, wherever you are, and whenever you might be listening.
Radio Luxembourg.